Hello one and all, and welcome back to Create Ball, where today is another school video. But not just any school stories will be included in this one. These are specifically stories from Mr. Patric's class, because that was by far the most eventful class, and he left to teach at another school at the end of this year. So I'm making this in his memory, since these videos are the closest thing I have to sentiment. Also, real quick, I really tried to put some actual segues between the stories where I could, but I couldn't for most of them because they were basically just bits. So to avoid the audience getting whiplash from how abruptly the stories end, I'll add something in post to let you guys know when we're moving on. Anyway, let's get going. So Mr. Patric teaches history, and his class is like a discussion more than an actual lecture. So, like I just said, a lot of these stories will just be jokes that came up in class. Like one day, Mr. Patric was talking about capitalism, and the gaps in social classes that it creates. And he used Beyonce as an example of the higher classes, and Tyrone, not at all close to his real name Smith, says, "I literally have no idea who that is." So someone, who we can call Xylophone, opens up her Chromebook and finds a picture of Beyonce and shows it to him. His reaction was, and I quote, "She's ugly." And everyone starts laughing because Beyonce isn't that ugly. I'm pretty sure he just got a girlfriend when this happened, so I would say he was thinking, beans, I can't be attracted to anyone else ever again forever. But I don't think that was it, because a few minutes later, Mr. Patric asked him who he thought was more attractive between John Green and Beyonce, and his answer was, John Green. After that, whenever we watched a John Green video in Mr. Patric's class, which we did often, Tyrone, not at all close to his real name Smith, would be reminded of his answer to that question by everyone in the class. One day, we were talking about the Mexican-American War, and when we got to the Alamo, Mr. Patric says how the Mexicans killed all the Americans at the Alamo. And someone says, all of them? Yes, all of them. Like, every single American. Every single one. What about David Bowie? I don't know why David Bowie was their first choice of an American citizen, because the joke would have worked with any American, and David Bowie wasn't even an American. But you know that on that week's test, when he asked about what happened in the Alamo, I said that David Bowie, along with all the other Americans, died. Speaking of tests, for the last 2 months of the school year, I started making little drawings for my answers on tests. I tried doing this at least once per test, and I ended up answering this way when he asked me what the Opium War was, what trench warfare was, what the Dust Bowl was, and why Hiroshima and Nagasaki were so relevant. Speaking of not having an adequate segue, one day in history we were talking about mortars, and Mr. Patric said, they're like geometry that kills. And then I said, Geometry That Kills is actually the name of my metal album. Yeah, I was actually the only person that listened to that one. Oh really? What'd you think about it? I mean, it was pretty bad. Especially that one song where you just broke down crying halfway through. Oh, you mean Inside Out Cleats? Yeah, that one. When we were talking about World War I, everyone kept saying, oh yeah, Nazis and Hitler and all that. Which is actually World War II. So I created an easy way to remember which war is which. World War I had no Nazis, or Nazis. And World War II is yes Nazis, or Yahtzees. I thought that was right clever, so I told it to a few people in my class and Webb when I passed him in the hall. Then the next day, when I went back to Mr. Patric's class, I was about to tell him, but he said he already heard that 4 times, since apparently everything I touch spreads like wildfire, which I'm pretty sure I said in the last video too. Oh well. Since I'm a chronological kind of guy, I think it only makes sense to go from World War I to World War II. So when he mentioned the Aryans and how they had to have blonde hair and blue eyes and everything, I said, couldn't you just gouge out your eyes and cut off all your hair so they couldn't prove that you didn't have blonde eyes and blue hair? Well, I guess, but you'd still have to be white. What if you also, burnt all your skin off or something? Then you'd be handicapped, which they also didn't take too kindly to. Yeah, maybe you'd be disabled. Or maybe you'd be more abled since you can survive without your skin. I mean, that's kind of a weird thing to flex on people, but I guess it's pretty impressive. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, this was his last year teaching at our school. So one day when he was out of the class, somebody said, hey guys, we should do something for Mr. C before he leaves. Their idea was writing him a letter or giving him a gift or something, but since my class is full of absurdists and nihilists, all their ideas were to kill Mr. C, preserve his body, and then create an AI in his likeness that would be given control of the corpse so he could just continue teaching us. When we told the plan to Mr. Patric, he was flattered that we would make an AI of him, and took little note of the fact that we planned to kill him. This was also soon after we gave him the juice boxes, which he threw away because he thought were poison, so I'm kinda surprised he wasn't more cautious around us. Then one day, he saw some body horror that I kept in the front of my binder, and the exchange went something like this. You know, I want to say you have a gift, but it's super disturbing, so it's really more like a curse. Well, I'm glad you think that, because that's kind of the idea. This one is especially upsetting. I don't like how humanoid it gets down there. Then, as he walked away, he said, I wouldn't hesitate to kill any one of those. I bring this up now because I decided to give him a body horror as a gift, which is a much better gift than murdering him, in my opinion. So I drew him something on the second to last day of school and gave it to him on the last day. He told me that he would hang it up in his kids' room so they'd never sleep again. And that was probably the best response anyone has ever given me on one of my body horrors. Now I'd like to end this video with some of Mr. Patric's inspiring quotes. You have the reflexes of a cat that's been dead for several years. The Transformer movies are like modern operas with Shia LaBeouf and CGI. I think everyone, including God, can agree that peaches are the best tasting fruit and apples are the most useful. And finally, you have to be really careful when you're killing someone. So that's the end of the video, which is great since this is already 3 pages long, as opposed to the usual 2. I'm not getting any sleep this week, am I? Anyway, until next time, don't die. And if you excuse me, I have to animate all this. Good! I'm so glad. Bye!